Hey everybody, we are here for another episode of America's Rail Stations. We're here in Lykens, Pennsylvania, in Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. We're here at the rail station here. I got to get a lot more information on this because I sort of came up here just as a random thing. Somebody had given me a Shell gift card for a gas station, and needless to say, there aren't a whole lot of Shell stations in my general region. And there's one up here in Lykens, so I was like, it's Saturday, let me run up and do this. And I had seen before that there was a rail station that still existed here. It's actually weirdly on the West 2K site that I use for a lot of my research with my rail stations. This is listed in the stations that no longer exist. It's here on Market Street, right off of Main Street, which is just south of here. And it's right here. It's actually right down. I used to do the Family Dollar here in Lykens when I worked with Josh. And it's right down the road from that. But it's a beautiful building. I'm going to take you around it, and then I am going to do the history of this station. I believe this was, if I read correctly, a little bit that I did read, this was probably 1800s when this was built, and it looks like it would be an 1800s building. And I believe this wouldn't just be a passenger station, but this would also be like a baggage station as well. So I'm not quite sure if this is original location. I'm assuming it probably is, that it has not been moved, but it was restored completely. So we're going to turn this around. I'm going to take you around this station so you guys can see this. But they do have a rail and a coal museum here, which is quite neat. It's not open today, but it's supposed to be normally on Saturdays like 9 to 3, but it doesn't appear that anybody's here. So I'll have to find out what the hours are when they actually are here and bring you guys back here to check this out. So let's turn this around. So here we are at the Lykens Railroad crossing station here. We're going to go down the one side over here, and you guys can just see sort of the old architecture. These were pretty simplistic structures. You know, they basically were utilitarian, and they were meant to fit a purpose, and that's what they did. I would assume this here would probably be the ticket window, just because, and there's probably another ticket window right down there as well. But they would have done things like, you know, this would have serviced not only the passenger traffic but also any kind of freight. So I think this is sort of combo freight station and passenger station. But you can just see sort of like just the, it's really neat. And this was redone, restored, brought back to, and it looks like even here they have little plaques under each of the window that it was donated by certain people, which is pretty neat. That they decided they wanted to keep this treasure of the community still here. And functioning. And it's just so neat when communities do this and they actually keep these old places like this still around. Nice big chunk of coal there. I like how the sign too, the Lykens sign, how it's just sort of got that wear, got that old feel. But you can see here on the sign, it says Lykens train station and coal museum, and then their hours. Like I said, we're here within the hours on a Saturday, but it just isn't open today. This would actually probably have been, I would think maybe that would have been more the ticket window, but who knows. But it's really like that side of the building down there would have been probably more the freight. But within this, they have, you know, the museum, probably the park set up like the original train station, much like Anvil and some of the other ones that we have visited. But yeah, this is just another one of those hidden little gems. And like I said, at some point I want to find out when exactly they are open. They have the hours there, but then there's probably seasonal type thing. And being this is in winter, not a busy season for that type of stuff. But let's talk a little bit more about the Lykens rail station and its dates of functioning, and that this building is original to the original station. So this Lykens station has quite a bit of history. This building that's there today was actually built about 1892, 1893, but the station goes back as far as about 1830. That was when they first incorporated, and then I think by about 1831 they started buying up the parcels of land because this was part of a larger railroad conglomerate, of course, called the Lykens Valley Railway. The idea behind it was to take it from Lykens and to take it west to Millersburg, Pennsylvania. They eventually would make it go east about another 2 miles or so to the little town of Williamstown, but it is over 20 miles track, and it was his own conglomerate for about 20, well, about 30 some years, because it lasted till about 1866, right after the Civil War. It was owned for about a year by one gentleman, but they would operate passenger traffic. So I had talked about the building being the front part that's toward Market Street would have been the passenger side, and then it would have operated as a passenger and a freight station. Interesting thing, around that time of 1866, Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading Railroad each had a station there. Now, the Pennsylvania Railroad station no longer exists. That was torn down at a different time, and I'll actually show a picture then later in this video of that station. It looked very similar, but I think it was probably on the other side of Market Street. But this was actually wound out becoming a hub where the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading Railroad met, and the station is currently there today. That would have been the Reading Railroad station. Now, I think it was 1837 when the first station for where the current station, uh, I guess it had been the Reading Railroad station, or whatever is Lykens Valley Station. I correct myself. That would have been over towards Second Street because the track had sort of gone north across where Maine is, behind Wiconisco. It hadn't done that yet at that stage. So that station was the only one, the original station, that had been at a different place. When the train track went and made its way north, as you can see in these maps, you can see how it starts out in the south and then goes sort of north through the town. Uh, that's when they would have moved the station to the current place at Market Street. And then in the 1860s, when uh, Pennsylvania would have come in, then they would have had two different stations. So those stations would have been built in, I believe, the 1860s, the Reading and the Pennsylvania, which would have replaced the original original station. And then in the 1890s, about 1892, 1893, is when they would have taken those structures down and built the current structures, the one now being gone, the Pennsylvania station. Anyways, this Lykens Valley Railroad lasted till 1866. Then it was taken over by Summit Branch Railroad for about 15 years. And then for the next 30 years, from 1880 to 1910, it would have been Northern Central Railway, eventually being bought out by the Pennsylvania Railway. Here you can see one of the things that they had is they did have a turntable here on site. It was quite a substantial railway site that had all kinds of outbuildings. I mean, basically the only building left is the freight and passenger station, but it was a much larger station. So Lykens definitely had a big role in the local railway. As promised, this is the Pennsylvania Railroad Station. This would have been built 1892 to 1893. And I can't really find when that would have been torn down, but probably, I would assume somewhere in the 1970s, because the memories that I've been able to find for anybody is that the railway was still running passenger traffic in 1955. That's right around the time that they went from steam to diesel. Most likely it lasted to 1960 at the longest for passenger traffic, probably more like 1957, 58. The diesel locomotives would have continued the freight traffic through into the early 1970s, like 72, 73. And by 77, that rail line was no longer operational. And in 1980 is when they took the tracks out. So somewhere probably between 1975, 1980, this was probably dismantled and taken down. Because there would have, at that stage, there would have been no point to actually have two rail stations anyways. But it's neat yet, none the least, to see these rail stations. Another function of this railway that
really doesn't get talked about. Here you'll see a trolley, and this would have been a north-south route along Market Street. It basically its terminal was at this station that we were just at, the Reading Railroad station. It did go north up through past Wiconisco and quite a bit, but this was a service that functioned about 1910 through to about 1950. Once again, this is sort of one of those unique things. We talked about the Union Canal quite a bit, and that sort of technology wound out taking over. So eventually it was cheaper, more efficient to use the railway. So the Union Canal sort of had its heyday between, 1820-ish to 1888 or so. This is very much similar, the same where the railway took over. The trolley system was an efficient and good way to transport between towns. Its problem was that it could only go along the tracks. So when buses became a relevant way of travel between towns, your buses took over because they could go wherever they wanted to, and that was usually these trolleys died out in the 1950s somewhere. So it's another neat thing that was here at Lykens was this trolley service that wound up running north south. As I talked about before in this series, uh, these rail stations they really served a purpose that they were a doorway to a much larger world. Before you were sort of hampered by how far you could go with your wagon, where you could stay, all those different types of things. The railway truly opened up the greater world. Now you could go to those towns you'd only heard of. You could, go on these daycations and things like that. A lot of these different railways, they go to specialized parks that were meant specifically for spending a day away, as a farmer. And you rarely got those days, but the railways provided that, and these stations were certainly sort of those doorways, sort of like we talk about, like a book is a doorway to a different world and those types of things. So these were centers of the community. We look at them today, and it's hard to understand, much like the mills of old and some of these other places, even like the churches. They were usually much larger community blocks than what we see today. Here, the only thing that we see is this station itself. But there, a turntable there somewhere. There were all kinds of different, blacksmith sheds, carpentry sheds, all the different things that were needed to help the railway function and provide for whatever needs would arise. And they really were these places that everybody knew, and there was an excitement when you got to go to the railway station and where it was going to take you, and what new adventures would show themselves. So one of the reasons for this series is, surely just to just go back and re-envision what the past was like, and these are these doorways into which we can envision what the past really was like. Thanks everybody for coming along, and as always, we'll see you all about town.
So I forgot one last thing. I did do a little bit of research on this. I'm still not really sure whether this is just a seasonal operation for this train station or if it does, it's no longer an operation, a museum and whatnot. Because I've seen things that said it was permanently closed. The one thing I know they do there is it's called the Haunted Rail Station. So I'm not sure if somebody else owns that now, and all they run out of it is this haunted rail station during a certain period of time, obviously near Halloween. But that is the opportunity to be able to go in there, I guess. I'm going to search around, contact a few different people, and maybe one of you has the answer as well of whether it does operate as a museum and whatever else they have that's available there. And if it is, we will return at some point and we will go and explore that together. But once again, thank you. And we'll see you all about town.